Hello everyone. In this session, we'll look at Node.js application and how to use SAP Cloud Platform Connectivity to connect to both publicly available OData service and also on-premise OData service. In the previous couple of sessions, we had looked at SAP UI5 applications. So if you haven't looked at that video, please do so because we'll be using some of the artifacts from the previous sessions as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Node.js application and connect to the Northwind OData service, and also I'm going to connect to a on-premise OData service as well. So I already have the SAP Cloud Connector and everything set up. So I'm not going to cover that, but I'm just going to show you how to connect and get the data from this on-premise OData service. So what I'm going to do is in my business application studio, I'm going to create a folder called my Node.js, and let me open that workspace. And once I open this workspace, I'm going to create a very simple Node.js application using npm init. So let me go into my Node.js. And here, what I'm going to do is npm init, and I'm going to create a very simple Node.js application. So for the name, I will leave that as my Node.js. Version is fine, description is fine. For the entry point, I'll use server.js. Everything looks fine here, and this should create me a package.json file. Now, I'm also going to bring in Express npm module, and along with that, I'm also going to bring Axios, which is also a pretty popular Node.js module that is used for REST services. So I'm going to bring both of them. And once I have this, if I look in my package.json file, you will see that there is a dependency for Axios and Express. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change the script, the start script, and I'm going to say node server because I want to start node server.js, which also means that I have to create a file called server.js. So let me go ahead and create this file server.js. And once I create this server.js file, here I can bring in Express, and I'll say require Express. And similarly, I will also bring in Axios as well. So I'm going to use both Express and Axios. Now, the key thing to remember, the difference between a Node.js application and the SAP UI5 application that we created in the previous session is that the SAP UI5 application runs on the browser on the front end, whereas Node.js, this application runs on the back end. So that's a key differentiator. So for the port, I'm going to use process.env.port, and if this is not available, then I'm going to default to, let's say, 5000. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start this Express server, and I'm going to start it in port 5000, and I'm going to give it a function. And in this function, I'm just going to say console.log, and then I'm going to use a string template literal and say listening on port, and the port that I'm going to be listening on. So I'm just going to console log that. So nothing fancy here. I think this should be straightforward. Now what I want to do is I also want to make a call to this Northwind OData service. So let me have an endpoint defined. So I'm going to do an endpoint which says if I go into /products, then I do want to go and say I want to handle products requests. I want this function to be run, and of course I would need to define this function. So this function, let me go ahead and define this const, and I'm going to do async, and then I have full access to the request and response object from the Express server. And here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Axios module that I brought in. So I'm going to do const response equals await, and I can easily just say axios.get and then put the URL right here. But I'm going to like spread it out and show you all the different features that it has. So here I can say that the method that I'm interested is get, and the URL that I'm interested the URL that I'm going to get is I'm going to use this URL right here all the way up to products. So I'm going to put this URL here, and then I'm going to have a params object, and in this params object I'll do $format. The format that I'm interested is in JSON. Again, like I said, I could have simply put them all in one, just axios.get, and this would have done the same thing. But I'm just going to spread it out just so I can show all the features that it can provide, and I can just say application/JSON. So at this moment, what I have is I've made a GET request to the endpoint, this endpoint. So if anyone gets to /products, then they would make a GET request to this, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to response.send, and I'm going to send this response.data.d.results. Now d.results, that's because I think in V2, OData V2, like you know, the data comes under D and results. So let's see if this works locally. So what I'm going to do is do npm start, and this should listen on port 5000. And if all goes well, and if I go to /products, then the /products should give me the Northwind data. Okay, so everything is working fine here. Now, what I want to do is I want to deploy this to Cloud Foundry. So I can simply do a cf push. So I'm going to do cf push my Node.js, and I'll do //random/route, and I'll get back to you once this is complete. Okay, the deployment is now complete, so let's go to Cloud Foundry. And if I go down, I see my Node.js application. And if I go in here, I should see the endpoint for our application itself. And if I click on this, and if I go to /products endpoint, then I should see the data. Now, like I mentioned, the key differentiator between this and the SAP UI5 application is that the Node.js application runs on the back end. SAP UI5 application runs on the front end. So if you had done something like a fetch on the SAP UI5 application, you would run into the course error, whereas because this is running on the back end, you don't run into those kind of errors. But let's go ahead and kind of clean up this code. Now the thing is, I don't want to have this kind of a dependency here. What I want to do is I want to use the destination service that is available in OData in the SAP Cloud Foundry environment. So I don't want to put this this host here. I want to use the destination that we had already created, and we had created destinations when we were doing our SAP UI5 applications. We had created a Northwind_API destination and also a sales_API destination. So I want to use that. So what I can do is the idea is I want to read this base URL from that destination and then go ahead and make this call. Now, there are many ways of doing it. One is the manual way of querying the destination, getting the base URL and all that, and if there are any credentials, getting that information and all of that stuff. That's one way of doing it. But the cool thing with these NPM, with the Node application is there is a package that some good soul has created. So we can simply use that package and it can do all the work for you. So what I'm going to do is exactly that. So thank you for whoever created that package. And I'm just simply going to use that package, and then I'm going to use that package and make this call. So let me go ahead and create this new terminal. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to install this package npm I, sap-cf-axios. So someone has created this package that can do exactly what we want. It can go query the destination service, get all the information, and then we can make that call. So we're just cleaning up the code right now. So instead of making this like where we are hard coding this base URL, I don't have to do it anymore. So what I'm going to do is now that I have this package installed, I'm going to bring that package in here. And the way I can do it is I'll give it a name, cf-axios equals require and sap-cf-axios. And you have to we have to specify default here. So this is how you bring in this module. So we have sap-cf-axios. Now to initialize this, what you can do here is I can do something like this: const axios1 equals sap-cf-axios. So that's the name that we have given here. And then we just specify the name of our destination. So this package is smart enough to go to this destination and get all the information for us. Again, this destination we had created when we used the SAP UI5 application. So if you haven't seen that video, please do so. So we are simply passing in that destination name, and this will take care of everything for us. Now here, I don't want to use Axios anymore. I'm just going to use Axios1, and this Axios1 is getting all the information from Northwind API. Now, because it's getting all the information from Northwind API, I don't have to specify the base URL. So in this setup, there is no credentials, so it just gets the base URL and makes the call. And let's make sure that this thing works. So I've removed the base URL, but the application should still work. So let me go ahead and deploy the application, and I'll be right back once the deployment is complete. Okay, the application is now deployed to Cloud Foundry. So let's go to Cloud Foundry, and there is our application. But what we need to do before we run this application is we need to bind it to the destination that we had already created. So like I mentioned, that we had created this destination in our SAP UI5 application. So we're just going to bind this my demo destination. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this, and then I'm going to bind it to, let's say, I'm going to bind it to the my Node.js application. So I'm going to select my Node.js application from this list, and I'm just going to bind it again. So now we have this application bound. So let's go into the application here, and what I'm going to do is, since we just bound the service, for good measure, I like to restart the application. So once I restart the application, then I can go to this link right here, and I should be able to see the data from Node.js, from Northwind. So if I go to the endpoint /products, and if I hit enter, so I should get the all the data from Northwind. So what we have done here is now we are reading from the destination, and then we are showing the data. So this is a much more cleaner approach, and we can have the destination, we can have the credentials stored in there, and so on. Now this is so cool because we are simply using Axios. So one of the reason why I wanted to split this up like this is to show that you're simply using Axios the same way that you would do. You simply change this to Axios1, so you're just specifying Axios1, and you didn't change any of these properties. So this is really cool. Now let's do the same thing for our on-premise service as well. So for on-premise, I'm going to have a new endpoint. And this new endpoint, I'll say /materials. And here, instead of products, I'll call this materials. And I'm going to do pretty much the same thing. I'm going to copy this whole thing, and I'm going to change this to Axios2. and I'm going to call this sales underscore API because I already have a destination called sales underscore API. So if I go into my destination, you can see Northwind underscore API and sales underscore API. So I already have that. And here for this URL right here, I'm going to remove this URL and I'm going to use this URL right here. So go all the way to CDS. CDS/materials. So I'll put the material here. Yeah. So I'm going to do /material. And this is not Axios 1, it's going to be Axios 2. So looks good on my end, I believe. Axios 2, sales underscore API. I have the URL set up. Everything is set up. I'm all set, and the user just needs to go to this endpoint. So I'm going to deploy this to Cloud Foundry again. Now, one thing we need to do, we have already bound the destination service. We also need to bind the connectivity service, but that we'll do once the application is deployed. Okay, the application failed to deploy, and that's because I didn't change the method name. So I'm going to change the method name and going to deploy it again. So this needs to be handle materials request because that's what we need when we handle this endpoint. So now I'm going to deploy it again, and then I'll get back to you once deployment is complete. Is now deployed. So let's go into Cloud Foundry. At this moment, the app is not going to do the endpoint correctly because we don't have the connectivity service bound yet. So if I go here and if I go for materials, if I type /materials, and if I hit enter, and if I go to F12, it's probably going to fail because it's still spinning here. It doesn't know how to get to the on-premise system. So what I need to do is I need to go back to my Cloud Foundry and I need to bind the connectivity service. And again, this is something that we covered in the SAP UI5 video. So I'm just simply going to use the same connectivity service, my demo connectivity service, and I'm going to bind this to my Node.js application. So I go in here, bind application, and I'm going to select my Node.js, and I'm going to bind this application here. And for good measure, because I bound a new application, new service, I'm going to restart this my Node.js application. So I'm going to restart this. And at this moment, once I restart, I should be able to get to both the endpoints now. The products, which is going to be my publicly available endpoint. So here, if I go materials now, I should get the materials data. Yes, so I'm getting the on-premise material data. So right now it's formatting it. And if I go into products, I should also be able to get the publicly available Northwind OData service as well. So that's how, and this module is pretty cool because it was able the on-premise system requires some kind of basic authentication, and those values were stored in the destination service, and the NPM module was able to go read the destination, get all that information, and use that information to make the call to the on-premise system and get the data as well. So pretty neat NPM package, so it makes life easier for us. Okay, thanks. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you. Bye.